everybody, and welcome to another episode of Coffin Talk, interviews with the living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. And this week, coming to us from around New Orleans, if not in New Orleans, is Danny Whitson. He's a professional magician and stand-up comedian and podcaster and actor from Oak Ridge, Tennessee, with a passion for magic, comedy, and meeting new faces with every show. For the past 20 years, he has been entertaining people with cards, coins, ropes, and anything else he can make disappear or crack a joke about. He's performed for celebrities, Super Bowl champions, and Grammy Award-winning artists. He's even starred with Kevin McDonald from the hit comedy sketch show Kids in the Hall, a huge favorite of mine. And he performs regularly at Harrah's casinos and for companies such as Bush's Baked Beans, Waste Connections, Alcovision, and All Meds. Danny is easy to find on the internet, and you can actually find his own comedy horror movie on Amazon Prime. And has also been featured in iTunes, Spotify, Mental Floss, The Chive, and Blank News Magazine as Knoxville's magician. And based on this, I'm guessing you live in Tennessee, and I got New Orleans completely wrong. I don't know how I did that or why I did that, but who cares? Let's get the show rolling. So, Danny, why don't you tell us why you're from Tennessee and you're making me look dumb that you're not from New Orleans?
Well, first of all, Mike, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. This is an awesome podcast, and I love the topic. Very original stuff. Why am I from Knoxville? I think that's where my mom and daddy decided to do it. And then we just I was stuck here. But no, New Orleans is a great town, by the way. And also the podcast I host does air live on the radio throughout New Orleans. So that's probably where you got that from.
That's why. Okay.
So you're not crazy, Mike. You're not. I got to shorten that bio a little bit. From Knoxville, Tennessee. Been a stand-up comedian / magician for going on 20, probably 20 years. I don't even keep up with it anymore. But and I'm have a big interest in this topic, especially this topic.
It's funny because when I was reading your bio, you put magician before comedian, but I not only is magic and comedy to me part of a similar enough world, but you're hilarious. So even if you're doing magic, you're a comedian. At all times, I would say when you're performing, not in a regular conversation.
It's kind of weird because I get asked a lot, which one do I enjoy doing more? And I really it's both. It's like your kids, I love them both equal. One's a little more psycho than the other, and the other one's a greasy hair who sits by himself all alone in the cafeteria, but I still love them both. You know what I mean?
Totally. And let's just get into a little bit of the history of your career. What initially led you to magic, and how old were you when you officially declared yourself a magician?
That is such an interesting question. I love that question right there because, I was kind of a late bloomer in magic because most people, most magicians start out when they're a child, they get a magic kit, or a magician comes to their birthday party. My parents didn't have that kind of money. I think we got a plumber one year. You know what I mean? It was, yeah, it was. But I was probably close to, 19. When I got 19, 20 years old, when I got started interest. And now, don't get me wrong. I always had the interest because my dad was a trickster.
Cool.
He would, get a magnet on a newspaper and act like it's moving on its own while he's got another magnet, would freak me out. Or he would always be a practical joker. He loved to play jokes on me as a kid, So, it was always around. But doing magic never was really a thing until, one day I walked into a brick and mortar trick shop like a lot of us do, we've been in before. And, this guy was doing these things behind the counter that I just couldn't believe. But I'd never seen a live magician before, and it was after that I was like, I have to learn this. Where can I learn this? So he shoved a few books in my face, and it was probably the first time I'd ever really cared to read a book in my entire life. And I just gobbled everything I could up, and literally, I tell people this is the craziest thing about magic is. I can remember standing in front of a mirror, Mike, an entire year practicing one move so no one would ever know. Now imagine how crazy it is. Most time people practice things to be able to say, "Look what I can do." I was practicing something to be like, "Look, I'm doing nothing." You know, uh, but I just remember maybe 2, 3 years I was terrified to perform. I was just, I'm not good at this. I've got to learn these moves, but I got so obsessed with it. And I think it was about 2 or 3 years in, and I remember doing my first magic show and feeling like I could call myself a magician. And there's something that just clicks in your head that you're like, wow, I can finally call myself a magician now. And if any magic geeks or anybody else listening to this, I love you, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I guess it's the same thing probably with some other like music and get to other things as well. I'd probably say.
Well, yeah, no, that's really cool, and I can relate, like, as far as the practice time and what you're trying to do, and that is a great example of what you're trying to do, and it does segue into, unfortunately, some hack cliche questions that I just have to ask because I am a huge fan of Magic. I got, just for the audience's sake, not for you, but I bought that Klutz book of magic tricks when I was like 8, and
Great book.
there was this trick where you could make a card appear in the bottom of an orange, and I did it like every year in a class, like without people knowing I'd already done it. And I remember like just loving that feeling of like this is their first time, but I'm getting better at this. And it was funny because the book said you're never allowed to tell anyone, but I, even at that age, I was like, but you just told me. So I am curious. This is the hack cliche question I was talking about. Do you ever tell people how to do something? Do you have like a censor for like how you would say, okay, sure, I'll tell you that trick, or what's your sacred rule for that?
Well, here's the cool thing is, magicians, the internet changed everything,
Mm.
absolutely everything. And it affected magic. Magic was one of the first performing arts that the internet affected, way before music, even though you heard about Napster and this, but magic was affected immediately because it's the only art form that is based around a secret. Um, and at first, a lot of magicians were, oh my gosh, all this exposure on the internet and this and this and this. But here's the thing, you get to a point as a magician that there are several methods to perform the same trick, the same effect. There are several different ways. And I started out being all secretive of my secrets, very protective, and now not at all. Not at all. It's not about the secret at all. It's about the entertainment, about it. So, but here's the other thing: is a lot of the routines that I do are my own method. So if someone does come up and say, "Hey, this and this and this and this is what you did," and I'm thinking, "Well, you're boring." But yeah, you're right. If you nailed it, I'll say, yeah, you nailed it. Gosh, how bad has it got to be you? You know,
Yeah,
I mean, if that's what you're thinking about while you're watching my show, then dude, get out of there. Go kick rocks, bro. You know,
yeah.
but yeah. I mean, secrets are no, but we live in the information age, and we're getting ready to be into the I guess I can't remember what they're calling it, but the AI age.
Hmm, hmm.
So stuff like that, you're going to have to, if you go to a magic show, you're going to have to escape and go to a different place, the same way as you do as you go see your favorite movie. You're not watching that movie saying, I bet they're doing this and that. And, if you do, then gosh, sucks to be you, bro.
Great answer, and thank you. That really does help me understand something, and I'd never even occurred to me how much the internet would ruin air quotes, but also real quotes, everything, and yet at the same time, how much it helps new people get
Absolutely.
into things. So, like, I'm never ever going to castigate the internet for existing or for doing what it's done because young people love to learn new things, and like you said, it's just a beacon for that. So,
It's a love hate. It really is because I mean, now the old man in me is like, oh, I hate you. But then I'm like, what's gave opportunity? And I use it. I'm like, hey, how do I do this? Bam, there it is. So, but yeah, for magic, magic has survived. Magic will survive. Like I said, and I think it just makes people like, yeah, you could Google how did this happen, but it's not how I did it.
yeah.
So,
And I guess that's a good segue into comedy, which, as my audience knows, because I talk a lot about comedy. But I'm like this Thursday, I'm going to a comedy show. I spend most of my free time, which I have none of that I have kids. But before I had kids, I was literally going to like 30, 40 comedy shows a year. I love stand up comedy, and I love all stand up comedy. I'm not like some mark for like just the arena tour guys. And actually, I prefer to go to the improv local ones and like kind of like I like the people who are about to get to middle or already at the middle and then seeing them on their first like headlining and stuff like that. And the reason I'm bringing all this up is I do like see that stand up comedy has changed many, many times over the years. I'm curious, do you have like a favorite phase of it? Like, do you think there was like one period
Oh
that was
God,
better than the
yes.
others, or are you like loving all of it?
Well, I mean, when you look back, okay, comedy and stand-up comedy is a fairly new performance art form. I mean, it was, you trace back to Lenny Bruce, and a lot of those guys were, Lenny Bruce was saying, crazy, a lot of crazy stuff, outspoken stuff that people weren't used to. And then you had the back in the Chitlin circuit, a lot of your African American comics who did not have the stage and the platform that some of the other, whites did, but then you can look at like Richard Pryor was the first one to step up and really blast the shocking things to shock the white people and got their attention. Uh, I think, you know, probably my favorite time looking back is as a fan of stand-up comedy. I love the late 80s, early 90s as you're
Cool.
creeping into mid 90s, big. I love the George Carlin, and I'm a big Richard Pryor fan. Loved Richard Pryor. I tell a lot of people when they first get into comedy, go look up Richard Pryor and you can see him bomb. And that's it's such a great thing to see
Yeah.
because you get to see the king fail,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
you
That's
know.
cool.
So it humanizes people, and stand up comedy is the only art form that is the only way you can be good at it is if you truly bare your soul and have you got to be very self aware.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think that's why it was interesting when like there was the so-called cancel culture movement and like some comedians were actually succeeding in it for exactly the reason you said, which is they were like, well, I wasn't hiding anything before, I'm not gonna hide anything now. I feel like we are out of that, and I don't even think it's because of politics, even though a lot of people want to say that. I think actually people got tired of it. But I am curious, what was it like for you between like 2019 and 2023? Like, did you have to alter or change anything?
I did, and it was gosh, this is okay. Probably the word. And don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I'm not somebody who's going to walk around and just say a hole things.
No, no. I think
Uh,
just for your sake,
and
my audience is open minded and cool. We're not like,
so I mean, I don't say I'm not a shock guy. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love shocking people. But I mean, I didn't say things just to get the shock reactions or stuff like that. I'm not going to punch down. I don't. That's just not my style. But now at the same time, I will tell you this, and this is something very important, and this is for non-comics. This is for everybody that when it comes to stand-up comedy, no topic is off the table, folks. No topic. But even if you're starting out in comedy, if you've been in comedy 10 years, it doesn't mean that you're funny enough to talk about that topic. You get what I'm saying? There's different
yes,
skill levels. All
yeah,
right, you're not Richard Pryor, you're not George Carlin, you're not these, so take it down a notch. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like I'm not going to walk in a room and do an abortion material, and expect to keep my audience not, separated. Traditionally I try to avoid politics because in these days and age you can go anywhere and get politics.
Yeah.
I don't come to my show, let's forget about politics. uh I've got a gay son, and sometimes I've got a bit about being a straight dad and a gay son,
That's cool.
and I'll talk about that. And sometimes it's funny because sometimes you see some of the macho men, and I'm like, it's okay, boys. okay to love him, you know. Uh,
That's
but
cool.
uh, but I mean, I danced around that. Now I did have this happen. This was back in the Me Too movement. And first of all, once again, I love women. I've got a daughter. I've got a wife. Women rights. But there's nothing worse on this planet. I'm just going to tell you right off the bat. There's nothing worse on this planet than a bachelorette party at
Oh
a
my god.
show. And here's the thing, Mike. Now, all right, Mike. I'm saying this, and women can come attack me. They can come burn my house down after I say this. But men know when to shut up. Eventually, we will shut up. Even when we're drunk, bumbling idiots, we'll shut up eventually. Okay, dude, there ain't no shutting drunk women up. It just you can't do it. It's impossible. So I'm doing a show, and it's the worst. You know, you can ask any comic, any performer. A bachelorette party is the worst thing that can happen to your life. And they're shouting out, going back and forth. And the she was getting filthy. She was getting super dirty. So I'm having to throw dirty back at her. You know, we're going back and forth, dirty, dirty. And then finally she shouts out, and this is when this tag was hot. She goes, hashtag me too. And then it just
Yeah.
everything stopped. And I thought, man, I'm kind of, you know, kind of stuck here. So, and I'm going to bleep this out myself, but I said, ma'am, somebody would have to want to you first before you can use that hashtag. And it was just a ooh, and then she, lost her mind, and then security had to walk her out of there. So I was like, this is awful. Just like with anything, you got people that's going to over abuse a situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was a bartender, so I can definitely relate to drunk people
Yeah.
never shutting up, and especially bachelor parties. And for anyone who didn't like that and wants to write hate mail, Danny can be reached at his home in New Orleans, Louisiana. Make sure you email the right one.
New Orleans, yes.
Yeah, New Orleans. But no, that was a great answer, and I do feel like now more than ever, it's a good thing to talk about all of our experiences in those times because society just does this. It contracts, it expands, it like rules come, rules go. So my last question on the comedy magic stuff, and then we're gonna get into the more metaphysical stuff about like death and dying and all that. Is there's a famous phrase out there which is never meet your idols. I have only met one idol and it was awesome, but that's just my one take. So I'm not trying to get you to name any names or say anything like that's going to get you in trouble or just, to gossip. But I am curious about that quote because I know you've met some very famous people
Oh
and all that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
would you agree with that quote? Would you say it's always true, sometimes true?
Majority of the time, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to say the majority of the time because they're, one guy in particular, who is, he's passed away, but the late great Harry Anderson.
Oh,
And
wow.
people, yeah, me and you know who Harry is,
Yeah.
but probably some younger people may not know. But Harry, he was Judge Harry Stone on Night Court. But before that, Harry was a comedian slash magician. Before that, Harry actually was a con man on the streets
Wow.
in New Orleans.
Whoa, did not know
So
that.
he was but and so super knowledgeable, so entertaining. And I was lucky enough to meet him a few times and pick his brain a little bit. And I mean, he's one of the major influences, because when there's a comedy special that you can go see, Harry Anderson's. You can probably see it on YouTube for free because it was back in the '80s, and it's called Hello Sucker. And it's clips of Harry's comedy club act, and then he does sketches in between. Which, by the way, I mean, it's haven't even began doing this yet, but that project is on its way. There's going to be a Danny Whitson magic and comedy special, and
Awesome.
it's going to be a stand-up show and in sketches. So, and that's inspired by, Harry's Hello Sucker, which I haven't seen anyone do anything. I think Piff the Magic Dragon did something similar. But no offense, Piff, mine's going to be better than yours. So, but yeah, I would definitely say most of the time it's true. I've met a lot of comics. I've been around a lot of them a lot. And that's the other thing that's kind of that's a frustrating thing about show business because you really know who the genuine people are and who are the the POSs.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's it's like that in a lot of entertainment. But I gotta say, I will tell you this story real quick. I was performing. I'd gotten booked at a like a the fanboy club cons. I was performing a show there. I was doing stuff there, and beforehand, well, Danny was going to walk around and rub elbows with the has been celebrities from my childhood.
Very cool.
And dude, I can't even. I'm not going to drop the guy's name, but I'm going to tell you the movie. And dude, this may break your heart. He may have been having a bad day. Okay, all right, cool. But everybody else was cool. But anyways, I went up and I introduced myself to the dude from Gremlins.
Uh-huh.
Okay, now this is what sucks, man. Because dude, I mean, Gremlins. Come on, bro. That movie hits with us.
Yeah.
We watched it as a child, and dude, he was the biggest, beanbag I ever met. I mean, he was just a jerk show, and I don't know if he was having a bad day or maybe he hated magicians. I don't know what it was, but I was just like, bummer, man. I wish I would have never have met you. And then later on, I'm sitting in the office next to Skeet Ulrich waiting on my freaking paycheck. And I'm like, this is weird. But
Yeah.
but my saying is this to your question. I will say
Yeah.
this real quick. Uh all my heroes are dead. I can
Mm.
officially say that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. It's funny. I keep like seeing on the internet like so many celebrities are dying. I'm like, well, did it ever occur to you that celebrities kind of started recently, and that's why? And so anyway, um, but okay. So let's move on. Speaking of death, to the actual like majority of the topic of the show, which is death and dying and metaphysics. I actually believe that comedy is the solution to most of our fears. That if you are able to face your fears and laugh, and you're able to see the humor even in tragedy, life is just a lot easier, or at least it feels easier. So that's one of the reasons I embrace stand-up comedy. It's probably not a coincidence that my love of it ramped up after like I hit rock bottom in life, which was following a divorce and just the fallout of that. So for me, it's like a great relief. But I guess we'll start with the actual question we always ask everyone on the show, which is, what do you think happens when you die? And for you, I'm gonna add, did it ever change throughout your life, or has it always been consistent?
Hey everyone, if you're a fan of the show, please head over to mikeyop.com and click the subscribe button. It's the best way to support us, and it's free. That's MIKEYOPP.com. Thanks.
Oh, it's constantly changing. As a child, I was, raised in a Baptist church, so you had the fire and brimstone kind of stuff. And then, bad people go to hell and good people go to heaven. And then magic of all things turned me into an atheist
Wow,
for
that's cool.
for the longest. And it's just because you kind of, the cat's out of the bag with a lot of things whenever you get deep in the study of the magical arts, as you want to call it. You learn how the human mind thinks, how the human mind processes, remembers things, and and then you catch yourself, oh well, I could do that, I could do that. So you start, oh, this is how Christ did this is how da,
Yeah,
da, da, da.
totally.
So you go down that rabbit hole. And then what changed me from an atheist to a I guess spiritual. I used to make fun of people when they said, "Oh, I'm spiritual." I was like, what does that even mean? But when my mother passed away, and yeah, I mean, it was, the closest thing, person I'd ever really, and I had lost grandparents and stuff, but the mom really hit hard. And I just remember one day just needing to talk to her so badly. So on the way on a drive, I just started talking to her. And I'll tell this story too, real quick.
Please.
I Mom was always a big fan of my magic, and there was a favorite card trick that I used to do just for her, and didn't touch it. Once she passed, I put it away. I'm like, I'm never doing this again. And I remember it's about 3 or 4 months after she passed, I was driving home, and I said, Mom, please, if you can hear me, just let me know. Please let me know. And I remember coming home that night, and I went into my magic room. All magicians have a magic room, folks. We do. Uh, And I was moving some stuff around on the shelf. All of a sudden, a deck of cards fell right in front of me. And I looked, and it's the deck of cards that I would use to show my mom that card trick that I hadn't.
Wow.
It was a special type. It was a trick deck, and and I hadn't seen it in months, and I just knew.
Yeah.
I knew it was right. And here's the thing. Now that's what started to lead me into it. Was a journey, a couple years to where I am now. It took me a while, but since then, my mother has passed, and my father has passed, and my sister has passed just recently. My sister just passed in January. Here's the thing, folks. Okay, people can be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry for your." They're still here. And, I talk about this a lot on my podcast. I mean, not, well, the podcast I host, Beyond the
Yeah.
Tinfoil Hat, it's actually Ryan Stacy from Tessa's podcast, but I do host it. And I talk about this a lot in my podcast. Now, don't get me wrong. I physically miss my mother, my father, and my sister. I want to hug them, touch them, but they communicate on a regular basis with me. And no, I'm not burning crystals or sniffing some type of, weed outside in order to make contact with them, or no. It's just that my windows and my doors are wide open now for them. And anyone can do this. Dude, anybody is so. I don't mean I'm starting to sound like an info commercial, but you get where I'm going. And
No,
stop me
yeah.
if I'm rambling too much, Mike.
No. This is really good, actually. I love it. Yeah. And actually, what I would follow up with to have you kind of continue on it is that confidence you have and that sense of security and that peace and all that. I think the reason people are so skeptical is we're so used to science having measuring devices, and that's how you prove things. Yet, before these devices, people tend to believe in things and they tend to get corroborated. Do you actually think that we, a human race, will ever invent tools to measure this, what we're talking about, like the feeling of a presence?
Well, see, I don't know because, okay, here's the thing. First of all, I'm not anti-science, and I'm not any. I think all those things. We can only measure this reality based on the tools that we have, the tools that we got to work with.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff we have no clue. Like we don't have we've got eyes because light exists. We've got ears because sound exists. We can touch things, because we've got hands because there's things. But then there's other things out there that we do not have the actual tools to be able to acknowledge, pick up that do exist. I think this reality that we're in is I call it the matter hard reality. Then there's a consciousness reality. There's two different things, and there's so much that we do not understand when it comes to the consciousness. I don't think I think when we die, our consciousness goes maybe to I'm not sure if it's another timeline, another dimension, but there's something there, and you're able to communicate with your lost loved ones. I don't know if we will ever get there though, because I mean, maybe one day, but so much does have to change first, I mean, because even like when you look at our top physicists, now they laugh at anything. And here's the worst thing. Well, actually, this has become the dumbest thing that anyone can say, Mike. And this is what everyone's told, especially as children. We're all told, oh, it's all in your head. Well, even if it is,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean it's not real.
Yeah.
Where do you think that chair started that you're sitting on? It was an idea.
Yeah. I've been reading for pleasure, but it's more because I feel stupid sometimes when I'm talking to smarter people. So I've started reading this book on the history of science, and it's not how science works, it's the history of discovery. So it shows you how many times people have been wrong, bumbled into something, the pure luck of it all. And one of the most incredible things to me is just that it's always coming back to like it is all in your head, and that like quantum physics, like all of the like real advances. And so like Einstein was very religious. He's considered the smartest person in recorded history. Richard Feynman, who's like an amazing American physicist, who's he figured out that the O-ring tube had expanded, and that's why the Challenger blew up. All of them were actually really spiritual and religious. And it's funny because, like you, I used to like choke on laughter when people said I'm spiritual, because I come from Berkeley, California, and it's just obnoxious. It's like,
Yeah.
but now that I get older, I'm like, oh, I don't really have time for the mean atheists. The nice atheists, no problem with you, that's fine. But like,
Any atheist, this is the funny thing too, is I've got I know people with all types of beliefs. I do, and I don't go around crapping on people's beliefs. I don't. But if when you got that one atheist that's got the chip on their shoulder, oh my gosh, dude, you don't want to debate me, bro. You can't win this. And I'm not somebody who I try to, like, I'm a big fan of Jesus. I'm not a Christian. I don't call
mhm,
myself a Christian. I don't knock people who are,
yeah,
but I'm not a Christian. But I think Jesus was a very special thing. I think Buddha was a very special thing. You know, there's a lot, but I think, in my opinion, I think people may have I think Jesus is probably the most misquoted, misinterpreted, person who has ever walked on this planet. You know what I mean? I think people misinterpret a lot of stuff that he says, and basically, in my opinion, I think Jesus was basically saying, okay. I'm going to throw this theory out here real quick, okay?
cool.
So I told you, dude, I love this topic.
Yeah, no, this is
This is
awesome.
my topic, man. Okay. And I try to do this. I really do try to do this. But when you think about it, Mike, every person you have ever met in your entire life, any interaction you've ever had, that's a version of you that they have created. Okay.
Yeah.
There's Mike who helped the old lady across the street. Then there's Mike who flipped the dude off for cutting him off in traffic. Okay. So you are a villain in someone's reality.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I like the theory of this multiple dimension, a billion versions of Mike world. Okay. Now, your job while you're here, while this particular Mike here, the more good mics you create, the better it is for you as living eternal life as a good person with love and
Yeah.
that's what you should, happiness. Okay. The more bad versions you create, well, to me, that would seem like, the closest thing to hell that you could get to if when this mic is over, you pop into the next one. And if you keep popping into this evil, bad guy with negativity, that's the bad place to me. Okay. So that's kind of my theory right now. Okay, that's kind of where I walk. It's not a religion. And what Christ was saying, is basically is like through me is through eternal life. What he's saying is, look what I'm doing, bro. I
Mhm.
love people. I'm
Yeah.
doing good things. If you want to live forever and this is how you do it.
Yeah.
You know. So I mean, that's kind of how I do. Like I had at my shows, we have fun, we play around, but I don't want anyone leaving mad. I want everyone laughing, having a good time. And I had an incident happen. This is right after my sister passed, actually. So I'm not making an excuse here, but gosh, I feel so bad about this. Uh, our garbage people were picking up our trash, and they didn't get my recycle. Oh,
Yeah.
our problems. He didn't pick up the recycling, but I went out there, and the poor guy got out of the car and cussed him out. And I was like, do your job, and then he leaves. And then about 5 minutes later, I was like, well, I just created a bad version of me for this dude, poor guy. I even tried to call back and apologize. I mean,
Yeah.
man, I'm really to that level. I do not want, but so, that's something that, to me, it makes sense.
Mhm.
So,
No, it's not only deep and profound, but it's really the only way to go through life. I don't think it's a coincidence that as we age, everyone, you get a little nicer or you get much, much meaner the way you just described. Like that, it's really you kind of like have to, as you age, get that self-awareness and just start to realize, like, well, do I want to be the selfish, self-motivated person that because most of us, especially in the American culture, we just tell kids like the world's your oyster, do what you want to do, be anything you want to be. And we try to say golden rule and treat others, but like the patterns of success don't show that. You could take any president, it doesn't matter which one, the current one or the ones before, they all like say and do tremendously weird things to get to that position. And so the model for the trajectory to success, even in stand-up comedy. It's like, that's why the Hannibal Buress Bill Cosby thing was like amazing to me, just because for some young guy to call out the king was audacious to say the least. But so I think it's really nice, and I do. It's weird because to be funny a lot of times involves taking the piss out of someone, being like a little like nasty. Yeah. So I'm just curious, like, how does the evolving Danny, the really nice guy that you're becoming and always have been, how do you deal with like that feeling of guilt if you do see the person's feelings get hurt? Like, you make the joke in person, you thought they could handle it, and then you're on the stage. Yeah.
Most times if I do, I will, if I did something to hurt somebody, I will twist it and bring it on me, you know. But most cases that doesn't happen. Most cases people are there to have fun, so I'm lucky on that. I don't, it's annoying when you do see people punching down or snatching up low hanging fruit. And I'm not against low hanging fruit, but to hurt someone's feelings, yeah, get out of here. You know what I mean? So I do avoid it. But now keep in mind though, I'm not tiptoeing either, but first I invite them, and luckily I've done this long enough to where most of the time I can read a room right and see who's willing to have fun. Because I'll play with the audience. We have fun, and that's just something really interact. I like to interact with them. But you can kind of read sometimes if someone's not, and I move on. It's not. And also I don't know if I answered the question earlier when you were talking about comedy and reality is something the thing that annoys me the most is how, and I mean, I know we hear this a lot, like, quit taking life so serious. You're going to die someday. And we're all going to die. And I promise you, when you're dying, the last thing you're going to care about is if you made that deadline at work. I mean, dude, just stop it, and quit. Seriously, there's so many things that people are angry about and topics, and really walk outside and look around. I mean, what is going on? What is this? What is a tree, bro? I mean, seriously, just look. You're like, why am I here? What is going on? It's all you can do is laugh.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean,
I don't name the episodes anymore, but what is this tree, bro? Is like the best podcast title of all time. We are up against the time limit, so I always let my guests have the last word, and it's not to plug your stuff because there will be a note for all that. Although I do want to say your clips are incredibly funny, and I love like your approach to comedy and magic, and you got the magical. Well, that's a pun, I guess, but you got that magical aura, that charisma that like really does make people drawn to you, and it's cool because it's a gift. You have the gift, and if you weren't giving it to the world would have one less gift out there. And so I do want to encourage people to check him out online and find him. But with all that said, what's something you want to leave my audience with?
Well, I tell you what, just whatever you think is, or whatever you're stressing about in this world right now, in this physical world that you can touch, I promise you, it don't matter. The only thing that matters, this is it, 100% it, is the people you love. And I know you hear it a lot, but I promise you that is all that matters.
Thank you so much, Danny. It's awesome to reconnect with you. And also, there will be notes for his podcast, too. So make sure you check out everything, the full experience. But for those of you at home who want to support Coffin Talk, the only way to support us is to head over to MikeyOp.com and sign up for the free subscription to all the weird stuff I do, including music, movies, podcasts, essays, fiction, blah, 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 blah. But this is Coffin Talk. This has been another great episode with Danny Whitson, who is not from New Orleans, Louisiana, and he is from the great state of Tennessee. And so please check him out and find him. And to everyone watching at home and to everyone listening, thank you again. My name is Mike Oppenheim. You have been listening or watching Coffin Talk. We will see you soon.